I feel like I remember you carrying this around in middle school.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't remember this. It could either just be that it missed me, or I was too young to remember this.
Everything in that
man.
statement just was shouting 90s. Like every word that came out.
Hello and welcome to this episode of I Should Have Known, the trivia game show that can't be trusted. Each week, one of our Quizmasters will present you with 4 facts about a topic, but one of those facts is a lie. And we're getting nostalgic over here at I Should Have Known. We're throwing it back to the 90s, and today your Quizmaster is Sups.
Hello.
Sups is going to be presenting us with 4 gadgets that were made in the 90s, except one of them was not made in the 90s. So join me, Andy, and our other host, Tanner, in figuring out which one of his gadgets is a lie.
Okay. Did you own a lot of gadgets in the 90s? Yeah.
Tanner did. Tanner had
Yeah.
all the stuff growing up. He had such a stereotypical American childhood.
Yep.
Okay.
Really.
Basically, if there was a new game console or a Game Boy, I got my parents to get it for me. Yep.
Wow. All right. So before we get going, here's the TQQ of the week.
Mhm.
If you combine egg and watch, which famous 90s gadget do you get?
The Tamagotchi.
Exactly.
I think that's got to be it. Yeah.
My God.
This episode is going to be so easy for me. Yeah.
I feel like I'm doomed. I did not have a Tamagotchi.
So for people who don't know, what the heck is a Tamagotchi?
This was released by Bandai in 1996 in Japan, and it arrived in the US in 1997. It's pocket-sized. It's kind of your
Mhm.
digital pet. So the
Mhm.
pet grows into, you have to feed the pet. If you overfeed, then it will die.
And wasn't it it was real time too, right? So you
Yes.
had to actually do it at certain real times in the real world, right?
Right. But in my experience, they always died. I don't think there was a way to keep them alive. I just always killed them.
Wow, I'm so surprised that you, as a child, were unable to care for a little electronic creature in real time.
It was foretelling how I would do the egg experiment in middle school.
Yeah.
Did you have one, Soups?
Me? No time for games. Only homework.
Study.
Yeah, study.
I feel like Tamagotchi wasn't a game. It was more of training for caring for a creature, motherhood,
was.
honestly.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, but for that one, you gave us the year. For the next 4, for the 4 big ones, you're not going to tell us the year until the end, right?
Exactly. All right. So, gadget number 1, Palm Pilot. The Palm Pilot was a PDA device. So, PDA in this case is not public display of affection, but rather personal digital assistant.
Okay.
So basically, this device could take notes, manage or view documents, contacts, and some of them even you could play games. It sold more than 30 million units worldwide. They had 2 variations. One was the professional, which retailed for $399, and the other one was the personal one, which was for $299. The original Palm Pilots had 128 kilobytes of RAM.
Kilobytes.
Oh, yeah.
Kilobytes. How could you do any of that
Oh.
with kilobytes?
What would you even be able to do? Oh,
Yes.
my God.
So 128 KB of RAM.
That's
Oh,
crazy.
wow. I don't remember these. I
really?
don't think
Okay.
I grew up in the kind of environment where people I knew would have used them.
See,
Okay.
this is where our experiences diverged, I think. I definitely had a knockoff Palm Pilot.
Yeah.
I can't say if it was in the 90s, but as a child or a teen, I definitely had a PDA. Not that I needed to keep track of files or contacts or anything. I didn't need this, but I definitely begged my parents to buy me one. It wasn't $299, but
Yeah.
it had a little stylus and you could play Snake on it, or it was
I feel like I remember you carrying this around in middle school.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But a little skeptical of the timeline there. So I had kind of
Mhm,
assumed when we started that it would be the 90s gadget, the lie would be older. But now I'm wondering if maybe this actually came out in the 2000s.
Right.
But it also could have started in 1998 or 99. And then it technically would count.
Right, because it's just when it came out. And so it could have come out
Yeah.
and people in New York and LA were using it in the 90s, but it didn't get to, rural Wisconsin until I'm trying to think also when they were replaced with phones,
Or
because
like
it's kind of redundant.
Blackberries. Yeah.
Yeah. I like your thinking. Maybe it's later than the 90s. It seems so
Right.
90s though.
It does kind of, I guess. I don't know. I think of like a beeper. It's like seems like a beeper.
Yeah.
Is that related to beepers? I don't
Pager.
know.
Yeah,
Pager, whatever
pagers,
they were called.
beepers,
I
beep.
also didn't
Yeah.
interact with people who had these types of things.
No.
Except medical professionals, I guess. So, okay, I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to pin this one somewhere on a timeline, and I'm thinking maybe later 90s or early 2000s. So I have to hear the
Right.
other three, though, before I can really make a choice.
Right.
Okay, with the 4 pilot. Number 2.
Okay. Let's hear what Talkboy is.
If you have seen Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, this was a device that Kevin uses to change his voice to trick adults.
Oh.
It had a cassette tape to record sounds and had a microphone. In the movie, this was just a prop. And Tiger Electronics, they obtained permission to recreate this toy for
Oh my God.
mass production. Of course, the device became very, very popular. There were 11 versions. The Top Boy was about $25. It's basically a small recorder that has a cassette tape which records sounds and had a microphone that users speak into, and then the recorded voice could be slowed down by pushing a button, and the voice became deeper. So you would think that somebody else.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a voice changer.
Yeah, so I had never heard of this one.
Me too.
I did not know about Talk Boy. I have not seen Home Alone 2 since I was a child, if I ever even saw it then. So it's hard to guess. But one thing that I could maybe think of is that, well, if I don't remember this, it could either just be that it missed me, or I was too young to remember this because it either came out before the 90s or in like the early 90s. I don't know when that movie came out.
Right. Like a historical timeline doesn't really help me too much because I don't remember that movie either. And I, to be honest, did not own one of these, but I think I remember it as a toy, as a gadget, because I remember things like weird little devices that could change your voice, like make it a robot voice or make it deeper or higher. I remember playing around with those. So I think this was in the same vein as that, but I never had one.
Your parents didn't get you a toy. Wow.
I know.
I know,
Yeah.
right? Now you're like retroactively angry at your
Yeah.
parents.
Exactly. But yeah, I agree with you. Like it could have been earlier. It could be an 80s toy, but then the Home Alone thing, that timeline wouldn't work. So it could be later.
I'm really glad this episode isn't which one of these gadgets isn't real because
Yeah.
Right.
this one
Yeah.
would be shooting up to the top of that list.
Yeah.
Like, that's so unbelievable, but that's not the debatable part of today's episode. So, like, I'm
Right.
just digesting all of this information.
Right.
I think I'm gonna have to just assume this was from the 90s. So,
Yeah, it sounds like a 90s toy to me. Like, I don't know what I mean by that. I don't know what a 90s toy is really, but
it's just a feeling you have.
if it's playing off Game Boy, that name, then like this fits in with the time.
Maybe.
But we're only halfway through.
Yeah, we have to hear more.
All right. Oh, the 4th boy. Number 3.
Ah.
So after the huge hit of Sony Walkman, Sony then released the CD player Discman D50. Sony's engineers, they managed to minimize the size of the player to make it as portable as possible. Sony also introduced a lot of enhancement technologies, particularly the electronic shock protection, ESP, to prevent skipping while the device was in motion. So when you were walking around and the CD was like, let's say, jumping around so that the music doesn't stop. And so when they introduced this thing, Discman became even more popular.
Sony Discman.
Wow. Well, I did not have a Sony Discman. I had a CD player, though. That was like my baby.
Yeah.
And I carried it everywhere.
Yep. Same, actually. I did not own a Discman. I got my CD player
No.
from Sam Goody, but it was like a knockoff. It was not Sony.
Same for me.
Yeah, I always called it a CD player. I never even thought of it as anything else. So I guess that kind of puts the timeline somewhere in there. But yeah, I loved my CD player. It was the most devastating thing when you drop it and then the CD would break inside of it.
Yeah.
That happened a few times. And especially when it was like burned CDs that like someone made for you. And you're like,
irreplaceable.
devastating. the social rules for me in
Yeah.
like middle school were all around like burning CDs. Like there was a whole culture involved in doing this.
Yep.
And you had to like decorate the CD and stuff. It was like a whole thing.
I pretty much invested in jewel cases. I was printing out labels for them with the song listing on the back. I was so into CDs. Yeah. I specifically remember my like atomic green see-through CD player that I would like try to bike around with, but it had to have the ESP turned on, the shock protection, because I would like, be trying to do BMX with this CD player in my backpack, and like the music was just like skipping and my big headphones on my ears were like falling off my head, but I was so cool.
The like ridiculous headphones. Yeah.
Everything in that statement just was shouting 90s, like every word that came out.
Yeah.
Those were the days.
Yeah.
But going back to the fact here, the Discman, specifically this one device.
Yeah.
I don't know when CDs came out, but I'm sure they were invented in like the 70s or 80s. I don't know when they replaced cassettes.
Yeah.
But do we think that was in the 90s or do we think that was in the late 80s?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident this has to be the 90s because to me, you were using cassettes in the 80s and then you were using the iPod as soon as it comes out in the 2000s. So this has to be the 90s to me.
I mean, I remember, like, I had the Mulan soundtrack on cassette.
Wow, okay.
That soundtrack slaps, man.
Yeah.
So I feel like if I was still using cassettes in the 90s, then CDs must have been, like, a little bit before that.
Yeah.
But it could be, like, a 1989 situation,
yeah,
so...
That's true. It could be right at the cusp.
But I do think this is, like, a late 90s, early 2000s thing.
I think so.
But we have one more to hear.
All right. So, last gadget from the 90s, the webcam.
Ooh.
So, the first webcam was invented in the 90s by two computer scientists, and they wanted a way to monitor their coffee pot from their offices. So, the building that they worked in had only one coffee pot for the entire building. And every time for them to come, let's say, from the second floor to the fourth floor, whenever that coffee pot was, that was a massive waste of time, right? Because if they go and they find that the coffee pot was empty, they had to spend another time.
Because they can't just make another pot of coffee.
That's too much work.
These are all men that you're describing.
They set up a camera in their room, connected it to the internet, and then that was the first webcam. And they connected it into their intra-network, so everybody could now view. So people from Japan and other countries, they were like, hey, can you leave the lights on at night? Because we want to see how the coffee is boiling, like the coffee pot.
Oh my God.
Sounds like the most boring
we
live
want to
stream
check
ever.
on the coffee pot.
After this happened, Connectix, a company that was founded by Steve Wozniak, who is also the co-founder of Apple, they released the first commercial webcam.
Okay.
That cost about $99. The camera was called QuickCam, and then it became very popular.
The webcam.
Almost sounds too early for the webcam.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say, if you had me guess, what decade did the webcam come out? I would have said the 2000s. The noughts.
Because what good is it if you don't have a really good internet?
Yeah, that's exactly where my line of thinking is like, who had good enough internet in the 90s where this would be useful? But if we're talking about just the story of this intranet webcam,
yeah, the invention,
then that could be the 90s. That does sound like something that could have happened in the 90s.
Right.
But if we're talking about the commercial device, it seems early to me.
Like when I bought one. Yeah, that's where it gets tricky. It's my experience of it versus when it actually was invented or came out. It can't be earlier than the 90s, but I feel like it's the 2000s.
Yeah, it's really hard to say, but I think it could have been like the later 90s that this came out, that this was invented.
Maybe it's like right at the end, like 99, just before Y2K.
Yeah.
I love this story though, with the coffee.
The coffee pot.
That's such a boring live stream.
Yeah. I feel like I was researching some episode about coffee and this story came up when it was it was invented because of coffee. But when did that happen is this episode's question. And I don't know. I'm not sure. But I do remember like I had a webcam that was separate from my computer.
I remember they were pretty big. Like I would plug in my speakers, plug in my big webcam, and then like maybe a microphone. Like so many add-ons. How many jacks were in my computer? Like goodness.
That's a tricky one.
I could see this being just at the end of the 90s, but I'm still very suspicious of this one.
Okay, well, if you could, Soups, could you repeat the 4 gadgets from the 90s before Tanner and I guess which one is not actually from the 90s?
Okay. Gadget number 1, the Palm Pilot. Number 2, Talk Boy. Number 3, Discman. And number 4, the webcam.
Okay. I would narrow it down to the Palm Pilot or the webcam.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's those 2. I don't think it's impossible, the Discman, but I think I'm more confident with that one being in the 90s than those 2. I would agree that's where I'm skeptical.
Yeah.
I think it's maybe the Palm Pilot is older. It's from the 80s.
Yeah. See, I'm thinking that what's the purpose of these? Like the Talk Boy is just a weird gadget that you just record with a cassette.
It's like a fun toy.
Yeah, it's a fun toy. The Discman, it depends on CDs. But with the webcam, you really only need it for like internet calls to me. And so you have to have a good functioning internet.
Yeah.
So that would lead me towards later than the 90s. And the Palm Pilot, it's functional in the 80s, but really it shines with the internet, but then it's already being replaced by the cell phone and then the smartphone.
That's kind of where I'm thinking that they invented a device that just digitizes your black book or whatever people used to carry around.
Right.
And I feel like maybe a device that did that is older, and then eventually they added internet like capabilities to it.
Yeah.
But I think maybe it could have started a lot earlier, since the technology just to digitize your contacts seems pretty old. That technology, and I could see people wanting that in the 80s, but I do think it's either too late or too early.
Right. That would kind of explain why I had like a knockoff, because it was already old. It's already like
it was already
widespread.
Old technology. Yeah, maybe.
That makes sense.
So I think I'm going to go with that one. I'm also thinking that the webcam, it didn't really become a major commercial gadget until like the 2000s, but maybe that coffee pot story is from like the late 90s maybe.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to go with the webcam though, because I think that it's useless without the internet, and the internet just wasn't good enough for video calls in the 90s. So I think it's a 2000s invention.
Yeah. And I'm going to go with the Palm Pilot number 1.
All right. So we have Palm Pilot and webcam. Okay, let's start with Talk Boy. The gadget was in the market for about 1992 to 1999. And those 7 years, they had 11 versions of this.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
So that one was in the 90s. We got that one.
Solidly 90s. Yeah. Now let's move on to Palm Pilot. The Palm Pilot was first released in 1996.
Oh.
Okay.
It was discontinued in 2011. So from 1996 to 2011, Tanner, you were saying webcam, you need good internet connection.
Yeah.
Well, so the scientist story, they invented webcam. So the scientist version of the webcam was 1991.
Wow.
So the lie is the Discman.
So the lie is the Discman. First released in 1984.
Okay.
What is very interesting is that when it first released, Walkman was still very popular. There was a long time because CDs were very expensive. But Sony Discman, even though released in 1980s, became super popular in the 1990s because of these added, like the ESP enhanced features that they added. And that's when it like took off. Like in the 80s, it was there, but like Walkman was still the thing because people were buying cassettes. CDs still didn't catch up.
Right.
But in 90s, it changed.
Yeah, that's kind of what we talked about, where we're like, the CD is probably a lot older than we think.
Wow.
But when did it become commercially successful?
Right.
It's later.
Yeah.
So,
That's really surprising to me.
I think that makes sense. Of course, nobody bought it though.
No.
Yeah.
You know, like
Right.
you'd have like a few niche nerds who were like, CDs are the future.
Right.
They used it, but everyone
Yeah.
else like had their cassette players, you know.
Right. Yeah, because to me,
So,
why would
yeah.
you replace your Walkman with a Discman if your Walkman works just fine and they're still making cassettes?
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And considering I was not alive in 1984,
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's true, but I guess I should have known.
Yeah, I think I should have known.
Thanks for listening to this episode of I Should Have Known. We'll be continuing with our 90s nostalgia next week. And as always,
Did you say dog boy?